Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Mini ERP application. In this episode, we're going to be creating an incredible application including income and expenses, invoicing and sales, purchasing, a dashboard that's going to include 3 separate reports, and we're going to do it all from scratch, right in front of your eyes, every line of code, every format. It's going to be an incredible marathon training. I can't wait. So let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me this week. I've got an incredible training for you. We're going to be creating it right in front of your eyes. I can't wait. We're going to be creating an ERP application that is enterprise resource planning. And what that means, it covers all aspects of a business, whether it's financial, scheduling, or purchasing, inventory. Generally, it covers a lot of things. In today's mini ERP, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be covering income and expenses. We're going to be covering invoicing and sales, purchasing and inventory, reports and graphs, all packed into a single screen application. It's going to be incredible. I've got a lot to show you. If you like this type of training, if you like those invoicing and purchasing and dashboards, and I'm giving you a little bit of a taste of this in this video, but if you want to go full on out, then perhaps our mentorship is the right program for you. Inside that mentorship program, I'm going to be creating a full featured invoicing, complete with inventory, stock management, accounting, cash flow, dashboard reporting, full purchasing, sharing in sync, and a ton of other features in a full accounting application. I'm going to teach you everything from concept to cash while I teach you how to build your own applications as we move within the define phase, the design, and then we go into the development, and finally deployment. I'm going to teach you every aspect. If you want to learn more about that, go to myexcelmentor.com, myexcelmentor.com. All the details are there. That's a great program. I've got hundreds of students in that program that are learning how to create their own financial independence through Excel application development. All right, let's get started because I've got so much to cover in these particular videos. I bring them to you each and every Tuesday. There's a free download below. Check the description below. This application is absolutely free, either through your email or Facebook. Down below, full download. You got that? Free, absolutely free. Make sure you do watch this video. Also, not just download the application, use it, because there are tricks and tips and techniques inside these videos that I teach you how you can make your own applications. Every single Tuesday I bring you these. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so here by clicking on the subscription below and clicking the notification icon bell. That'll ensure that you get these training each and every day. Let's get started. I've got so much to show you on this. Basically, what I want to do is create a single sheet menu with basically 4 sections: income and expenses, invoicing and sales, inventory and purchasing, and reports and graphs. So I've done just a little bit of the basic work just to help us move us along. This training could be well over an hour, so I want to minimize it as quickly as possible. With me, you're going to get full courses each and every week. I deliver value, and I'm so happy to do that each and every week. I've got a list of invoices. Basically, once invoices get completed, there's going to be a list of invoices here. We're going to do some filtering when it comes to reports, so we'll go over that. I've got some lists here, and these are just basically account types like customer sales, income and expense accounts. We're going to need that when we enter transactions. Categories that you might find helpful for particular income and expenses. A list of vendors. When we make purchases, we're going to need to know who to purchase them from, so we've got a list of vendors here. I've got invoice item. These are the specific items that are created once an invoice gets created. So for example, these are on invoice number 1, these are on invoice number 2, number 3, 4, and 5, and so on. So each invoice number has a specific unique ID, and then there's items attached to that. Purchase is the same thing, nearly the same as, of course, invoices, where this should say PO number, PO, because it's a purchase, right? PO number, a vendor, a date, and a total. We have a purchase list. We also have purchase items, right? This is the purchase number. These are the items that are purchased on individual purchase orders. Purchase order number 1, number 2, and number 3. So those are the individual purposes. So we've got a list there. Once a purchase order gets created, they get put on this list. We've got a list of customers. Nothing interesting on this, just a simple list of customers. We're just going to use a customer name. I've got a list of inventory items, basically item name, description, the purchase quantity. You know, when you normally make a purchase, we want to know what that default quantity is. We have the cost of it, and then what we're going to sell these items for, so that's important. We also need transactions, a list of transactions. When we enter a specific expense or a specific income, we need a list of those transactions. So they're going to be stored here inside our transactions. That's pretty much it. That's all we have the database. Everything we're going to be creating, all the work that we're going to be doing is based on this sheet here. So that means we're going to have 4 different types of categories, of course, income and expense. So let's get started on designing them. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it the basic header, and we're going to go all the way down probably to, let's just say, BF, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a formatting here, basically a fade. We'll go into fill effects, and then I'll just give it this darker. This will be our theme. This is the turquoise here, so we're going to go from darker. We'll keep this as the theme. Let me go above here so you can see it. And then I want the line below, basically all the same. Let's go ahead and click the last one here. The line below will fade into the main color. So again, formatting the cells on right click. Then we're going to fill the fill effects, and then we're going to fade it down. We're going to use the same middle color. Then we're going to go back into our what is going to be our background color, this light blue here, turquoise here. Okay, everything else will just go down to a large row here. Everything else is going to contain that main background color other than the first 2 columns. Okay. So then let's go ahead and just assign it that color into the home. We can give it that color right here, no effect. So that's going to be our main background color for our application. That's good enough there. So now, as you just saw, this is basically shape. This is what our shape's going to be. I want to create a menu based on this shape. This is just something that I found on a PowerPoint presentation. It's pretty basic, simple. It's just a symbol that we're going to be using, but I like it because it's got 4 different parts, and I can assign macros to those 4 different parts. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and then I'm going to drag this up to maybe a central part here. I've got some columns preset that is going to help us move a little bit quickly. So that's the idea. So the idea is that I want to click, basically this would be perhaps income and expenses, this would be invoicing and sales, reports and graphs, and then of course inventory I'm in here. So let's give this a title. We're going to call this capitalized mini ERP application, and hopefully I don't misspell things, but I probably will. So if something gets misspelled, the mini ERP applications. Okay, so that's basically what I want to do. And then what I want to do is I want to, each one that I click here, it's going to go to a different section. So I'm going to have one section here, one section here, one section, and it's going to go on to 4 different sections. So it's going to hide, basically this is going to hide, it's only going to show one single section at a single time. So let's say I'm going to put over on E, let's go ahead and go over here. The next thing I want to do is I want to add an income and expenses. So I've already done some formatting just to help us move things along, income and expenses. These videos are long enough as they are, so I try to do things to make them a little bit quicker, but I'll still allow you to show you the entire process. So we're going to put that, call that income and expenses. And then the next section I want to have, let's call that is going to be invoicing and sales. So we'll put that name in, invoicing and sales. And then also I want probably purchase orders. I'm going to put purchase orders probably here. I want to put purchasing. We can just call it purchasing or purchase orders. Either one is good. Purchase orders, because it's really an order that we're purchasing, and then we're making a purchase. And then the last one, I also want a reports and graphs section. Okay, so we're going to put that's going to be a little bit larger section, and basically it's going to allow us to create almost unlimited or many reports and graphs on a single. And I'm going to create 3 for you right there, but you can create as many as you want. Reports and graphs. Okay, so now we have these 3 sections. I'll check the spelling on those. Reports and graphs. So this is going to be the section. Only one section will appear at a single time. We'll hide the other columns. Reports and graphs. And purchase order, invoicing and sales, and income and expenses. Perfect. That's what I want. Let's bring in some additional icons that I've saved. That's going to help us move things along and make it look like a little bit more professional. So I'm going to bring in all these icons. These are something that I've saved, and then I'll reset the sizes because they're going to be too big. So let's zoom out a little bit, see where they are. Here, they've put them here. We don't need them all the way over there, and we don't need them that big. So we're going to drag them over here to the main section here, and then I'm just going to resize them, just something standard, which is fine there. And then I'll zoom in, and then we'll resize them accordingly That way we can work with them. Okay, so this is going to be our logo here. So let's bring that over here and then make that a little bit bigger so that we can see it. I'm going to give it a different color a little bit more similar to what our application, which is here. I'm going to do the same thing with this, just something a little bit font. This one looks good. Okay, so then the color's consistent, mini ERP application. Okay, so now what do I have? I've got, let's see, I've got a check mark. This is going to help us enter transaction. I've got here, this is going to be for invoicing, so I'd like to put that about right here. I want this one's going to be our home button. This is going to help us return. I'm just going to bring that over here. We're going to use that for every single one. And then what I want, I've got a, let's take a look at this. This I'm going to use for transactions. So I'm going to bring that down here and this here. So then what I want is I got a reports and graphs. Let's use that right about here. Then I've got another one. We're going to use this right here. That's going to be for inventory and purchasing. So I've got my icons here, and that's just what I want. I'll line those up a little bit better. We can align them up horizontally here and here just to make sure they're even, and then we'll just to make sure there's somewhat consistency on them. Then I'm going to do the same thing. Let's undo that. Then I'm going to do the same thing here, lining them up vertically here, and then I'm going to do the same thing here vertically here. So everything kind of gets lined up and has some consistency there. This one I'd like to use right in the middle here. So I'm going to bring this out, and I want to, actually that's a bit too big, so I'd like to make it look a little bit professional. In the center there, I want to center that, but I don't want that to, those edges are not good. So I'm going to move this to the back here. So we're going to go into the format here, and then send backward, and then send to the back. That's what I want, to get that nice look here. That looks good. Okay, so now I want some text on here. We're going to use these. I'm going to bring these over because we're going to use these a little bit later on. Now I want some text. I want to know what we're doing. So I'm going to insert a text box here, shapes, and we're going to insert a text box here. And this text box, let's just call this income. I'm going to capitalize it, income and expenses. That's going to be our first one. And then, but I want to format that. I don't want it to have that. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this shape fill. So no fill on the shape. We are going to say no outline. We don't want any outline on the shape. And I want this, let's go ahead and put it to 14 on the text, and I'm going to white and make it bold. That's going to look good. So I'm going to bring that right here, something like that. That should be pretty good there. All right, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that 3 more times, and I'm going to drag it over here and create titles for each one of them, and then I'm going to assign macros to them eventually. So this one's going to be inventory, and this one's going to be reports and dashboards. So let's bring this one over. So this one I'm going to be calling invoicing and sales. So let's change that, invoicing and sales. Okay, good. That's just what I want there. And then we'll bring it down a little bit here. Okay, I like that. That looks pretty good. And then the next up, what I want is let's bring that. What we'll do is we'll enter that, hit enter, and bring that down to the next line so it lines up. Then I'm also going to have, let's call this purchasing, inventory and purchasing, because we're focused on the inventory and purchasing. Okay, good. And the last one, we're going to have reports and graphs. So that's going to give us a name. Then we're going to be able to assign macros to them and have us go. So we'll create those reports and graphs. Okay, good. Let's just take a quick look at that, line everything up. It looks pretty good. I'm going to hold down the control and then down the shift actually, and then line those up. Doing the same thing here, just line them up. Make sure everything gets lined up and looks properly. Looks very proper. Okay, so now that we've got that all lined up, we've got our application. I'm going to move this down, drop it down a little bit. Perfect. All right, so we're good to go on our home menu. This is exactly what I want it to look like. And the only thing I might want to do is group them and then, of course, add a shadow. Let's go ahead and add a shadow and group them. So I'm going to hold the control down and select every single item. Another way to do that is use the selection option here and just go ahead and selection like this. Okay, but what I want to do is I want to put a shadow on this larger shape here first. So I'm going to group that shape there, and then I want to put a shadow on it. So I'm going to go format and the shape effects and just a little bit of a shadow on that to give it a nice look. There we go. It's just a very slight shadow. That kind of brings it out a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is take off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the selection change again. I'm going to select everything, and then I want to group everything, and then that's good. And then I want to group, hold down the control and group that. So basically I'm grouping every shape inside that. and I'm going to give it a name. We're going to call this home group, home and then group, okay, because I want to group on that. Okay, and every time you group things, you need to make sure that, of course, the size and properties are move but don't size. We want to make sure this doesn't get stretched any which way, vertically or horizontally. So let's just move this over here. Move but don't size. That's important. Okay, great. So now we have our settings. Now we can start to build out the rest of the application. So we've got our nice little home menu here. Bring that up a little bit here. That's going to look good. Once I bring it up, it's going to be right in the center. That's exactly the way I want it. Okay, moving down, let's say we've got now income and expenses. So let's put some fields on for the income and expenses. I want a date field. So that's first. Let's put in the date. I got to have an invoice date. And I also want to have an amount. So we're going to put in amount. And then we'll skip a line and then just go to account. We need to know what account is there. That's important. And a category. All right, so we can decide to use colons or not. Let's not use colons, so I'm going to remove them. So sometimes just be consistent. And I also have some automated formats, which is going to help us, and I'll show you what that is in just a moment. Okay, so we have those three fields, and I want memo too, so we can assign a memo to a specific income and expense memo, and that's going to be merged in center. It's already merged in center just because I pre-filled it. Okay, so when you go into the home, we have some formats here. So we have some cell styles that I've created. I've created 2 custom cell styles. If you want to create a cell style, all you need to do is just click any cell that you like and just go into cell styles and click new cell style. That'll automatically create a new cell style. I've done that just to help us. So when I create the cell style, as you can see, I've created this for the field and this for the labels. It's going to make it a lot quicker. So all you need to do is hold down the control on the labels and then just click cell style and click label. And I'm going to do the same thing for the field, holding down the control here. I've already merged the center just to make things a little, and then click field. So that's going to quickly be able to create our field. So now we've got our income expense. All we need to do is add some buttons here. So that's going to help us out. And then we're kind of done with that. So let's go ahead and, of course, I have to add some data validation here onto the account and the category. So that's going to be, let's go ahead and put in those buttons here. So I'm going to insert a shape. We'll just use a square shape and I'll make it consistent with the color. So I've got the color, and let's just go ahead and put in something like this, but a little bit darker, So I want to use a darker color. That's too dark. How about this? That's perfect. Okay, so what I want to do now is basically add the shape to this. So what are we going to call it? Basically just going to call this add transaction. So I'm going to type in add transaction because that's what I want the user to do. So, and we'll right justify that here. So go into the home, right justify it and put it in the middle, and then I'll make it bold, the font. That's good. I just want to leave room for an icon. So we've got an icon here. So let's put in this icon. We're just going to have to move it to the top. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is bring it up. And again, like I said, move it to the top. I've got the shortcut here. That's going to move it to the top. And then size it. Now we're going to use the same for each one of them. So it's going to be much easier when we add additional buttons. So that's going to add the transaction nice and big, just the way I like it. Going to group that. Okay. And then what we want to do is I want to put some icons here too. So for the income and expense, I want to put some icons for each one of those. So let's do that now. I'm going to copy this icon and just put it over here and make sure when you copy it, here it is. And then I want to do the same thing for invoice. So I'm going to select on the group. I'm going to select inside the group, not Control D, which will keep it inside the group, but I'm going to use Control C and then Control V, and that's going to put it outside the group. I'm going to do the same thing for this one here. For inventory, I'm going to bring it over here, Control C, and then select outside the group, Control V, bring it over here, and then same thing for reports and graphs. I'm going to use these icons for the individual sections too. So now we've got these. So let's zoom out here so we can see. This is going to be for reports and graphs. We'll move that over here. And then this is going to be for purchasing. We'll bring that over here. Invoice transactions, income and expenses here, and invoicing here. So now when we zoom in, we can use this we've got this nice icon, and we can add some shadows onto that to make it look a little bit better. All the way we have here is going to be reports and graphs, so I moved that a little bit too far over. Bring it over here. Okay, so perfect. So these are going to be part of the groups for each one. And then what we'll do is we can just hold down the control for each one of those, and I'll just put a small shadow behind it so they stand out. So we've got each one of them now, and then we'll do format and then picture effects and then just a shadow on that, a little bit shy. That way they stand out. Okay, so now we've got invoicing and sales. We can line them up too. When we zoom out, we can line them up accordingly, horizontally like this, and then just go ahead and we got one more here. invoicing and sales. I think we didn't put a shadow on that, so let's go ahead and put the shadow on that one, and then line them up. Perfect. Okay, so now they're all lined up perfectly. Now we can zoom on in. That's just an easy way for us to work through these. And all right, good. So that looks good. Purchase orders here. And we're ready to write some macros in just a moment, but I'd like to fill in the cells before we do that so we can see what we're doing. So we've got add transaction. That's good. We can give it a name, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to group it with this shape, but let's duplicate this button first because I need to use to add invoices and add purchases. So I'm going to use Control D. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move it over to invoicing and sales, because invoicing and sales, we are also going to have an additional button. So I'm going to call that save invoice. So just going to change the text here, call that save invoice, because we're going to need to save that. And also want to save the purchase order. So save invoice. Okay, and we can make it a little bit smaller. We don't need it that big. And then I'm going to duplicate that here, and we're going to use that for purchasing. So I'm going to bring this over here, bring this over here, somewhere over here. Once I create the fields, I'll better update it. And then purchasing, and then we have purchase orders here, and then reports and graphs. And the reports and graphs will probably use something like a refresh button. So I'm going to duplicate it once more, and then bring this for this, and then I'm going to save this. Let's call this save purchase. Okay, and we can expand that just a bit more. Okay, all right, so then one more time, we can undo that. Let's go ahead and ungroup that, I should say, because I'm gonna use a different icon. I'm gonna delete that icon. We're just gonna call this refresh report. All right, and then I've got a refresh icon, if you remember, in column A right here. So we can bring that over. Let's zoom out and then just slide that over and bring that all the way over here to our refresh. Bring it up right here. So once we do that, and we can also bring it to the top here. And I just brought it ahead in front of the button, and we can size it accordingly. Something like 0.3 should be fine. And bring it down. Okay, so now we can see everything. It looks nice. We're gonna zoom in a little bit, check the sizing on that. I'll make it a little bit bigger here. Now we've got everything properly justified here. We will center that, group it. We don't need to name these buttons, but we do need to group it with their icons. And then what we're going to do is group them together. All right, very good. But before we do group it, we need to, once the user gets and is viewing this section, we need them a way to return back to this home screen here. So we're going to create this home button here, but let's create that in a button. The first thing I want to do is this. If you look at this, it's kind of facing, the arrow's facing the wrong way. I'd like the arrow to face to the left because we're actually going back. So what we can do is we can just rotate that, and we can flip it horizontally. That's really what I want. And I want to put that in a button, something similar to what we have. So let's insert, but I want to do a round shape. So I'm going to insert a round shape, something like some big button like this. And I'll make sure it's perfectly round. So we'll change that to 0.6. And then now it's perfectly round. We'll give it the same fill and then the same look, the same effect. I think we had basically this preset here, something like that is fine. Okay, so we'll bring that back on top. We want the home button on top, make that a little bit smaller, so 0.35 should be consistent. And that's gonna give us a nice home button. We're gonna use that button for each group to have them return. So I'm going to select on both of those, or use my selection tool to group them, align them both vertically and centrally, and then group them. We don't necessarily need to give it a name because it's going to be part of a larger group. That group will have a name. So undo our selection. And basically what I want to do is have this as a group and group these three items. So I'm going to duplicate this home button. I'm going to use that same button for each section. One for the invoice here, one for the purchase order. Let's take a look. Copy it, and one for the purchase order here, and one for the reports and graphs here. Okay, so we've got that home button. I'll worry about the placement a little bit later of that button, but it's going to be something like this. Let's go ahead and put out some fields before we group everything so that we can see it properly. We've got income and expense, that's done. Let's focus on the invoicing and sales and zoom in and see what fields we want. It's going to be relatively limited, just going to keep it basic for now so we can get everything done because we got a lot to cover in this. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to put in a customer name here. So let's do that. All right, so let's go ahead and bring this over here and then I'll put in the customer name. So what we want is customer name here. And then I also want the date. So I want to put the invoice, that would be the invoice date. So we've got some fields here. Again, holding down the control button. What we're going to do is I'm just going to format it. Again, using our cell styles, our fields, and then doing the same thing here, holding down the control button, cell styles, and then label. Okay, now we've got that. Now I also want an invoice total here. So somewhere around here, I want the invoice total. I want to put that invoice total here. And then I want to have the invoice total here. And then basically what I want to have is our invoice fields, let's say right here. So I'm going to put in the item. I want the item here, the description, and the quantity. And then I'm going to have the amount and then the total. Okay, so those are the information I want here. So let's center those if they're not already. And then I'm going to create a little bit of just a different color background, something similar to our theme. So we're going to go into the fill effects and then just create a reverse fill here so that they can see clearly a difference between those, and then click OK. And then what I'm going to do is I want to put a border around it consistent with our theme using this color here. I'm going to go border all the way around like this. That'll be good. Okay, so now we've got our invoice total. I'll do the same thing here, format those cells, and then I'll put a border around here, and then I'll put the dotted line in the middle so that it designates the border. Okay, so we've got that covered. We've got an invoice total. This is going to be total. Here's our totals here. Now let's just select a large range. It doesn't necessarily matter how far we go down. And I'm going to color this. Let's just put it white. I'm going to give it a background color white, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use conditional formatting. So I'm going to use a new rule for odd or even row. So I'm going to use a formula, and I'm going to use a mod formula. I've got that on AutoHotkey so that it's quicker. AutoHotkey is a free software. Notice how it did it automatically. This is the formula for even rows. Formatted, I'm going to use the very similar color. So I'm going to use this as our background color here, but I'm going to go into just a little bit lighter of a color. So I'm going to select a little bit lighter here. That's going to give it a nice odd row so we can differentiate between the lines. I like that. And I'm also going to put a dotted line in the middle so we can separate those fields. And so let's go ahead and just in the middle there, so just in the center. And then on the ends, we'll put the border here, the solid line on the border. Let me move that up so you can see it. And then on the bottom, we'll go ahead and do the bottom border. Okay, that's what I want. That's going to give us a nice invoice total. Now, I've created some named ranges that are going to help us with this. Let's bring this button here, bring it over here. That's where it would look good. And let's bring this home somewhere over here. So basically, what I'm going to do is for this invoicing, I'm going to show columns L through R, L through S, or something like that. I want to show those so that only this is displayed. And we've got a nice look here. Let's go ahead and format these. These are going to be for currency, so we might as well wrap those in currency. They're already done. Looking good. Now that those are formatted, I'm going to bold these. Control B will get us there. That way it's bolded. Okay, so that's going to be our invoice. I want to put some named ranges here for our items. So let's go into the summit. Let's just finish out here our purchase order. Now, purchase order is going to be almost identical. So why don't we just copy that here and paste it in there? It's going to be almost identical. So we can do that. And actually, we're going to be duplicating the button there. So I'm going to put that right in, let's say T3, and paste that right in there. Okay, so we don't need the two. Obviously, we don't need this button here. That just came with the copy and paste. Save purchase order. We just need to make a few changes, right? It's not going to be customer. It's going to be vendor. We make our purchases from vendors. So we're going to just call this vendor name. And the date is fine. Item, description, quantity, and total are fine. That's fine. This is, of course, going to be purchase total, not invoice total. So purchase total. See how fast that is? Okay, great. So we've got that. I like that. That's all right. And then let's move on to our reports and graphs. Now, reports and graphs is going to be, I'm going to have some additional reports here. So what I want to do is I want to add in 3 different reports here. We'll build these reports out a little bit later on, but let's just go ahead and put in the names now because I want to put 3 names in. So the first one, let's call this, I'm going to bring it up here. Let's bring this home button up here a bit, all the way up here just to get it out of the way. So the first one I want to put is sales by customer. I want to have that. And then I also want to have an inventory stock report, and the idea is when I click on these, it'll display the report in the center, so it's going to be really cool. Income and expenses. Perfect, that's what I want. Okay, income and expense. So we've got sales by customer, inventory stock report. So when I click these, I want it to show up here, and I also want to set some of the dates. So I want to have, let's say, the from date and to date. So I want to know, let's call this from, because I might want to change the dates from and then to. So that way our reports can be day reflective based on the date. So we'll put this here, and then I'm going to create my label. This is what I want my labels. This is what I want my labels to be here. So I'm going to click on the cell style. That'll be our label. In fact, this one's going to be a little bit different because we have a fade. So let's just put the format cells because that one includes the fade. So we're just going to use our color here, our border color here, and then put in our line on the outline and the dotted line on the right side. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the right side here. This time, of course, it's going to be white because I want to have a white color, and then format those cells here, putting the border around the right side here, the solid border on the right, the top and the bottom. Okay, so we've got that there, from and to. That'll be good. We'll expand this here. So we're going to put in dates here. So for example, 1/1 and then 1/30. Okay, so that's basically the idea of it. Then once we change the dates, our data will refresh automatically here depending upon the report that we have selected. I'm going to use conditional formatting here. I want to know when we select a specific report, I want to know it. And all we need to know is which one that we have selected. And I've put that inside here. So when we select something, I want to know what row has been selected. That's going to go into B5. So let's write some conditional formatting that might look like. So I'm going to highlight those reports. I'm going to go conditional formatting. I'm going to create a new rule, and I'm going to use conditional formatting based on a format. And it's going to be equals row equals, and what's going to equal this, B5 equals row equals row. So when we change that, automatically it's going to change. What format do we want? Let's go ahead and put in a fill using the same format and same theme. We'll go with this, but in this case we'll use a vertical. I'm going to use a vertical and then make it to the left. That should be nice. Okay, let's take a look at what that might look like. Let's also change the font color on that. Let's change the font to a little bit white. Maybe we'll go with bold and white so it really stands out. Something like this. Okay, let's take a look at that. I actually even want to make it a little bit darker, so we'll use a darker color. Let's go into the fill effects and even make it a little bit darker, more darker than that, so just so the white font stands out. So let's go ahead. Actually, I think I have one color here. This color here would look good. And then I'll leave in a little bit of darker color here. Okay, so that's good. That's what I want. And then we can also put a border around it. That way it really stands out because we know what report's been selected. So we'll put the border around it. I'll put it on the top left bottom here. Okay, we got full border. That's fine. Okay, so now we know what report's been selected. Click OK. Okay, that way when we select one of these, it's going to highlight automatically as soon as we change it. So as soon as we change this to number 5, it's going to change. So we just need to change that through the code. It's going to change so we know what report's been selected. Okay, great. Everything's almost done as far as the look and feel. Now we're good to go. We're going to be writing code very, very soon. Now that we have all of our shapes and visuals, what I want to do is I want to group some things. I want to group everything so that we can easily hide and show it. So for example, I'm going to hold down the control. And I'm going to take all these items and I'm going to group them together using my shortcuts. Then I'm going to assign it a name. We're going to call this reports group. And make sure that after we group it, I'll do them all together, that we change the size and shape properties. And the same thing here. In this one, we want to take those shapes. We're going to use the icon, all these icons. I'm going to group them together. And this one we're going to be calling purchase group. So we'll just call it OK. Now we have purchase group there. Okay, and the same thing with invoices. I'm going to do the same thing with each one of them. Once they're grouped, we can work with them much easier together. Group them all, and in this one, we'll call this invoice group. And then one more to do, we've already done the home group. That's important. So let's go ahead and add this one here, holding down the control and all the shapes, grouping them together. And then in this one, we're going to call this income expense group. Okay, so now that we have everything grouped, what we want to do is we want to zoom out and I want to select those groups. So select this one, holding down the control, select this one, holding down the control. So you can zoomed out, we've zoomed out. Let's just double check this one just in case we haven't done that. Format those, size and properties, move but don't size. That's very important. We don't want to size this. So now when we size the columns or rows or anything, it's not going to resize, and that's exactly what we want. Okay, so now we've got everything. So now what I want to do is I want to build it out so that when I select a specific section, that section appears, whether it's income and sales, invoicing and sales, purchase order, and reports and graphs. Reports and graphs, let's check my spelling, purchase orders, invoicing and sales, and income expenses. All right, looks good for now. I'm sure I'll find mistakes later on. Okay, save our work. Obviously, got to save it much more often than that unless you have autosave on. All right, so let's go in and write some macros so that we can get this functional, this menu system functional. I want to click on any one of these icons and have that section show up. So how do we do that? Well, we do that inside the VBA editor. And you can use the developer to get you there, Visual Basic. If you don't have that, of course, you can go into the options and just go into the customizer and make sure your developers section is selected right here. If you don't have that or you want to use a shortcut, Alt F11 will get you there. and that's going to get us into this right here. This is our ERP. We're only going to be writing code basically here inside. This is the on sheet here, ERP sheet. We've got multiple sheets, but that's the only one we're going to be writing code in. We also have the ERP macros. These are going to macros that are going to run. We're going to have saving the transaction, saving the invoice, and the purchase order save. And of course the menu macros, that's what we're going to focus on now. And then we have a few macros for the reports. Just a few. We're going to get that right now. So let's go into the menu macros and see how we do that. The first thing, anytime you have like a menu, what you want to do is have a single macro that hides everything. Now that's always the best bet. That's much less code. So the first thing we want to do is take all of these shapes, hide them. Take all of these columns and hide them. So that's just what we're going to do inside this macro. So we're going to focus, of course, on with sheet 1. So with sheet 1, that is our ERP sheet. That's what we're going to focus on. So dot shapes, the first one we want to do is the reports. In any order, it doesn't matter. Reports group, that's the one we assign to the reports. Dot visible equals MSO false. So we want to hide that, okay? And this is going to be the reports. Obviously, it's kind of self-explanatory. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to update the name for all the other groups. It's going to be helpful. So just going to copy this, everything we have here. We've already specified sheet 1. I'm going to paste it 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and then we're going to updating the name here. So we have the purchase group, and it's much faster than copy and paste it. We don't need to type. We also have the income expense group here. We also have the invoice group. We assigned one invoice group. And then we also have the home group. Remember the home group, we want to hide that too. So home group. So not only do we want to hide the shapes, I want to hide all the columns. So how do we do that? What columns are we going to be hiding? Well, I'm going to start with column C. So we hide everything and then we show only what we want. And the last column probably right around here to, let's just say AH or something. AH should cover it. So all the way from C to AH. So dot range, and then we're going to see through AH, and it's not going to be value, it's going to be entire column dot hidden equals true. Okay, and I also want to make sure that when we change the menu, I want to make sure we set the scroll. So every time we change the menu, I want to make sure that first column is automatically scrolled to the first column. I want it to be on the upper left. I don't want the screen to show up like this or like this. I want it to be all the way on the left. So the best way to do that is to automatically scroll based on the column. So we can do that with active window dot scroll column equals 1. That would be the first column. And that's pretty much it. So that's all we have to do. Let's go ahead and run that macro, see if there's any issues. I'm going to save the code. Always save it before running the macro. I'm going to run the macro, and basically everything should be hidden unless there's an issue. So I ran the macro. Everything is hidden. We don't see anything, and that's just what I want. Nothing. Okay, so everything's been hidden, which is what I want. All the groups, nothing is shown. That's exactly what I want. So now what we do is we take this macro here, and we start every other macro with it. Then we show what we want. So the home, we're going to hide all. Same thing for the menu income expenses. Same thing for the invoice. And this makes it a lot quicker. And the same thing for purchase, as well as the same thing for reports. Okay, so now we have, every single macro starts with that. So now we only have to display what we want to display. So for example, the menu home, let's show that. So for the first thing we want to do is sheet 1. We can do with sheet 1 or either way, but you could do with, but we don't have so much code to write. So we'll just start out with sheet 1 dot shapes and home group. That's the one we want to show. Home group dot visible equals MSO true. This time we want to show it. And also we want to unhide certain columns, right? We want to unhide. What do we want to hide? Well, basically it's just the first 2 columns, which was C and D. They're already hidden now. If I right click here, unhide, we're going to show which ones we want. Slide over here. Basically I want to show C and D. Of course the group is still hidden, which is fine in our macro. C and D is what I want to unhide. So let's write that up. So sheet 1, we have to specify sheet 1, range C through D dot entire column dot hidden equals, and this time false. So that's pretty much it. That's all we have to do. Now all we need to do is pretty much copy this and then update the columns, update the shape. So we're going to paste that in, and it's much quicker. So now we've got the home group. So now instead of for income and expense, of course, this one's going to be income expense. And then what we want to do is we want to unhide certain columns, right? Which columns do we want to unhide for income and expense? Well, in this case, what we'll do is why don't we go through E, right? We already did E through J. So let's do E, we'll do E through K. Okay, so E through K, those are the ones that we're going to be unhiding. See how quickly it moves once we can set up the right standard. For invoice, right, we know that we're going to update that for invoice. And then all I want to do is put in specific columns that we want to display. So L, in this case, through, let's say, R. So L through R, those are the ones that I want to display. So invoice L through R is what I want. Okay, that's good for invoice. What about the purchasing? Purchasing is next. In this case, we're going to unhide S, again, through Y. You guessed it. Okay, so S through Y. And then, of course, we also need to update the shape name. In this case, we're going to be calling it purchase group. Purchase group. Okay, and the last one is going to be reports. So we're going to change the shape name, of course, to reports. That's the group that we assigned to that. Reports group, correct? And then the columns are in this column. Let's take a look at this would be Z. We'll start out at Z and then we'll go all the way to, I think, AH was the last column, right? So Z through AH. Okay, great. So now all I need to do is take these macros and assign them accordingly. So let's do that right now. Back into there, we'll save our work here. Go back into here. Let's go menu application. We don't have anything, so we want to display the shapes. Everything's hidden right now, obviously. So let's go ahead and run just one macro. Let's run this macro manually so we can show that main group. So I've just run it here. Now we're going to go in, so now we can see it. Now let's just take, everything looks good. That's what I want to see. So now that I have this shape visible, I'm going to hold down the control and I'm going to assign the macro to these three shapes. So what do we want in macro? Income and expenses. So click assign macro. Find this. So we got some macros here. So we got some macro, just the title. The one we want to focus on is menu, income and expense. Menu, income, expense. Click OK. And let's do the same thing for invoice throughout here, holding down the control on these three items, right click, assign the macro. In this case, menu, invoice, and sales. So it's right here, invoice, menu. Next up, again, we have the inventory and purchasing. So holding on the control, those three items, assigning the macro. This, we're focused on the menu purchase. And of course, the last one would be the reports. On all three of these, make sure not the group as a whole, but the individual items are part of the group is what you want to focus on. Right click here, assign the macro or N, again, in this case, reports. Click OK. Okay, save our work. All right, so let's test it out, see if there's any issues. Income and expense, that looks good. Now what we want to do is we want to assign that macro to these buttons here. So I'm going to hold down the control. I want to assign the home macro to this one here. So right click, assign the macro, and then again, menu home. That's the one because I want to go back to the home when I click that. That's exactly what I want. Let's try that again. Perfect. Let's try invoicing and sales. Same thing here, holding down the control. Let's holding down the control here on those two shapes. Same thing, assign the macro, menu home. Good. We're good to go on that. That looks nice. Okay, so invoicing and sales working good. Now inventory and purchasing. All we need to do, inventory and purchasing, that looks good. Click on here, assign the macro, make sure it's assigned here. I think we just did that already. Assign the macro, double check. Invoice menu home. So we did that purchase order. What did I miss? Okay, oh, I guess we got reports and graphs. This macro has not been assigned. Okay, so just hold down the control, assign the macro, assign the macro home. Okay, good. We're looking good. Now we've got our menu system built. So now income and expense, perfect. Invoicing and sales, great. Inventory and purchasing, great. See how nice and quick and easy that works? Good. Okay, so now that we have it, now we're ready to build some of the macros. Let's go with this one, income and expense. We'll move this over a little bit. There, looks good. Add the transaction. We can move this button over, make sure it's a little bit tighter here to the actual transaction here. We're good. All right, so we're going to add the transaction here. Let's zoom in. I think we're at should be at 100%. That looks better. Okay, so it's bigger there. Now we can bring it up here so it gives us a nice look here. And then I want to basically go to income expenses and I want to save this information. So when user enters a date, amount, account, category, and memo, what do I want to do? I want to save that in this transactions, date, amount, account, transaction. Now to help us move things along, I've already mapped this data. So take a look at this, G3, I3, G5, B4, I5 and G7. Well, let's take a look at this one, especially at B4. So that's been mapped. What do I mean by map? G3, I3. Let's take a look at the date and amount. If we look back here, we see G3 and I3. It's already been mapped, so I know what cell is this. But I also want to know, we also have to have some information. So we have some named ranges. Let's go over some of the named ranges now that we're going to get into that. We need to put some data validation. I need to know what account it is. So if we go into list, we see we've got some accounts. Now I've previously created some named ranges, so let's go over them because they're going to help us. So let's go into the formulas, name manager. We're going to go over all the named ranges. I've got accounts. Now all of these, we're just going to go over once as far as the type. These are all offset, using offset. So if we zoom in here, we see that these are offset, and that means they're dynamic. So once I tab into that using the tab key, you can see that it's based on the data. If I add data, it's going to increase. We use offset for that by counting all of those values, all the cells with text in there. So I'm going to count that. All right, so we've done that. We've got one for accounts. Okay, this one's called accounts, one for category, and I got one for vendors all the way down here, vendors. So we've done all that. I also have the criteria ones are created automatically based on advanced filters. So we're not going to worry about them. Those are created by VBA automatically. Customers, we have one for customer names. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at that. I've got one for end date. Let's take a look at that. What is that? Well, let's close this out and go into the ERP here. And I want to go into the home, and then we're going to look into reports and graphs. I've created a named range for this called start date and one for here called end date. I want to know those named range because I want to use those in formulas. And once we create it, it's much easier. Once we add that named range in, we can use those in formulas. So that's going to help us. So one for the start date, one for the end date. So that's what it is. Let's continue back in the name manager and take a look at the inventory invoice item name. Invoice item name is all the item names that have been invoiced. Invoice item name. Invoice item quantities, all the quantities that have been invoiced. Invoice number is based on all the invoice numbers. So every invoice has a brand new number, and that grows. Okay, so we have that. We have items. Items is all the names of all of our items, inventory items, the names of all those items. Then we have purchases. We got to focus on the purchases, right? All the items that have been purchased. Then we have all the quantities that have been purchased. We also have the purchase number here. Again, just like we had the invoice number, but this is purchase order number. Start date we went over. Transaction account is the account that's assigned to those transactions. When we create those transactions, when I create a specific interest earned for $55, it's income personal. So I want to know those accounts. I also want to know the amount that's going to help us when we create the report. The amounts, all the amounts, and of course the dates, because some of those reports are going to be based on dates. And then I have a list of vendors. Vendors are, of course, are here. We went over that. Okay, so that's it for the named range. We're going to be using that throughout the application. So I just wanted to know the first thing we're going to focus on is accounts and category, because I got to enter those inside the transaction. So going back to the home, into the income and expense. So I want to assign an account here as a data validation. So data and data validation, it's going to be list. It's going to be equal to accounts. That's the one I want to create. So click OK, and now we have a list of drop-down accounts. And of course, I want also categories. Remember, formulas, name manager, we've got one under category. That's what I want to do. So that's what I'm going to create. Again, data validation here, and then of course, list, and then category. I know I'm moving quickly, but we've got a lot to cover. So feel free to slow down this video if you need to, or watch it over and over again as many times as you want. Okay, so we have category, we have dates, we have amount, we have date, and memo. So that's pretty much what I want. So here's what I want. I want to enter a date, let's say 1/15, an amount of $50. I want to select an account, let's say rental income, and I want to put in a category. Let's just say office, and then let's just say rent. Let's just say we have income, rent, income for December. Let's say January, obviously, maybe December. Okay, so now that I've got this information, I want to take this button and I want to add all this information to this transaction table. So I want to find the next row and I want to add it to this. So how do we do that? Well, we do that inside a macro. So I want to add it to row 10. So let's write that macro right now. So into this, we have ERP macros. We're going to call this save transaction. That's the one I want to focus on right now. So the first thing we need to know is a transaction row. So we're going to dimension transaction row as long. And I'm going to loop through the transaction columns actually. So we're going to also dimension the transaction column as long. Transaction column as long. Now those are the only two variables we're going to use. We can set the transaction variable to the first available one. Now you notice our transactions are on sheet 9 here, sheet 9. So we can do that. Transaction row equals sheet 9. We want a first available. I'm going to use a auto hotkey to automatically type that in. Sheet 9's quicker. Equals dot range, the first available row plus 1. Right? That's the first available row. If we don't add plus 1, it's going to get us the last row of the value. Now that we have the first transaction row, we can write that up. The first available transaction row. Now that we have that, what I want to do is I want to run a loop. Why do I want to run a loop? Well, what I want to do is I want to run a loop from column 1 to column 7, and I want to, whatever's in G3, I want to put here. Whatever's in I3, of course, I mean I3 in this sheet here, I want to put in all, format this. Let's go ahead and format it while I'm thinking about it. Okay, so whatever's in I3, I want to put that amount here, and so on and so forth. So I need to run a loop from 1 to 7 to do just that. So let's write that in right now. For transaction column, it's called data mapping, equals 1 to 7. And what do I want to do for each one of them? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to take the information, actually 6, not 7, 6, sheet 9 dot cells, transaction row. We've already set the row. We know the first available row. Transaction column, that's going to loop through. Dot value equals what? Equals, again, sheet 1 dot range. What is the range? What is the range? That range is located. We know what the range is because it's located in row 1 right up here. The range is either going to be G3, I3, G5, and so on. So it's 1, row 1, based on whatever column we're going to loop through. So sheet 9, we're looking for the range, dot cells, row 1, transaction column, dot value. This dot value is dot value. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to say whatever is in this range right here, take that value, whatever cell that is, take the value that's there and place it right in this transaction right here. So that's just what we're going to do. Okay, so that's all we have to do to add all the data in there, and then just do next, close our loop, transaction column. That's going to close our loop. And then all I want to do is I just want to clear the contents. So I want to make sure we've cleared everything. Once we've added information, we can then clear the contents. So let's go ahead and clear that out. I'm going to bring this down so we can see both so we know what we're clearing. So sheet 1 dot range G3 I3 we're clearing. G5 we're going to be clearing that as well, and then as well as I5, right, the category I5. And also we need, and then the memo, of course, is going to be, the memo is a merge cell, so we need to include all of them, G7 all the way through I7. Let's take a look at that. Dot clear contents. Okay, that's going to clear everything. Sheet 1, G3, I3, G5, I5, G7 through I7. That's it. And then just let the user know that it's been saved. We get a simple message box. So message box, transaction, saved. That's going to cover it. All right, that's all we need to do. Pretty simple. Let's save our work. Now all we need to do is double check our work, hold down the control because it's grouped already, so we need to just select those specific icons. So all we need to do now is just go into transaction, save. That's the macro we just created. Now, again, just click here and transaction's been saved. Clear it all out. Let's look at our transactions. This is right, account, office, perfect. Okay, excellent. So everything worked out just right. Again, why was it 1 through 6 in case equals column, right? This is column 1. That's why, and this is the last one's column 6. So that's why we did the loop through 6 in case the 5 and 6. Okay, so that's why we loop 1 through 6, if that wasn't clear. All right, so now we've got our first one saved. Perfect. So we can go back to the home. Next one's going to be invoicing and sales. See how quickly that and easy that is? All right, moving on, vendor name. Now let's say that's purchase orders. Actually, invoicing and sales, here's the problem. We assigned this macro to the wrong one. This, just to make sure, this should all be invoicing and sales. Right click, assign macro, invoice. Here, this is the one we want. Okay, that didn't work. There we go. That looks better. Okay, that's what we skipped before. I knew there was something wrong. Again, assign this to the mode, assign the macro here, menu, home. Okay, good. All right, now we've got everything good. Home, invoicing and sales. That looks much better. Okay, customer name. We need to add our customers. So we have a list of customers in our formula name manager. We have customers here. So why don't we add the data validation for that? Data validation list equals customers. And click OK. Now we've got a list of our customers and we have a date. So let's put in a date here. Now what I want to do, format that date as a short date, a little bit better. Short date here. You can see the full year. And I also want the invoice total. This is going to be equals the sum of what? Everything in this column here. So we just loop that all the way down here. That's it. Just hit enter. Okay, now that we've got the total in there, I want to add the items in here, data validation in here. So again, what do we want? Item manager, we'll look at items. I want to add items in here. So close that out. And then I'm going to hold down the shift, select all, data validation, and then list, and then equals items. That's going to cover it. Now we've got our list of items here. So now when I enter an item, I want the description, the quantity, and the amount to automatically enter. So how are we going to do that? We can do that with a change, on change event. So we go into the developers and the Visual Basic here. Now we're going to be focusing on the on sheet. So when I make an actual change to this, I want something to happen. So we're going to select the worksheet here, not quite the selection change, but we're going to focus on worksheet change. So when I make a change to what? When I make a change anywhere from M8 all the way to M51, I want something to happen. So let's write some code in for that. If not, intersection. M8, I just use AutoHotkey to automate that. M8 through M51. That's what we want to happen. If something happens, then what do we want to happen? Then we want to basically load it. So I want to load in all the information from the item, but the best way to do that is we need to look up the information. So let's dimension something. Dimension the found item as range. And we're going to dimension that. So what we want to do also, just in case there's a change to a larger, one of the good things to do is if target.count large is greater than 1, then exit sub. Okay, so just in case it's larger, that prevents bugs. Okay, so now that the user's made a change, what we want to do is I want to determine if it's found. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the found items equal to sheet 8. Why sheet 8? Because that's where our items are located on the inventory items. Sheet 8 dot range, and they're called items. That's the name, remember. Dot find. What are we looking for? I'm looking for the target dot value. That's what the value. Then we can test if it's found. If not, found item is nothing, then it's been found. Let's just call that found. Found. Okay. If it's been found, then what I want to do is I want to take all the information from that and put it in there. So what do I want to do? I want to take the description and the amount, basically the purchase amount and the description, and I want to put the total and a default quantity in here. So I want to bring it in from sheet 8. So if we go and look, I want to take this description. We don't have a default sales quantity. We only have a default purchase quantity. So that's fine. So the description we want to put in there, and of course I want to put in the sales price. So from B and E. So let's go ahead and do that right now inside the code. So assuming that it has been found, we can then set it. Let's go back into our ERP. I want to focus on column N is where I want the description. So range N and the target dot row dot value equals sheet 8 dot range B, which is where our description is, and the found item dot row. That's the row it's been found on dot value. That's the description. So that's going to place our description right there. What about the rest? What about in P? P, I want to put the sales price. Here, I want to put the sales price, and then we can set the O for the default quantity. But P's got to come in there. So let's do that. Range P and the target dot row dot value equals, where's it going to come from? Sheet 8 also. We can just copy this and then place it in here. And then we can then just update the column. So the sales price is going to be located from column E. Column E. There we go. That's what we're right. Correct. Let's just take a double look at that. Inside our inventory items, E is where our sales price is. That's what I want to bring over into our amount here. Then I just want to put in the quantity and the total. So let's do that right now. The quantity, what's that going to default to? Let's just put that in as 1. So we can just copy this here, put that in as 1, and then change it letter 1. That's going to be not 10. And that's going to be O. So O is going to take on, that's going to be our default quantity. And then, of course, the user can change that. We can do two things. We can either put in a formula. We can put in a formula here inside the total and then not clear it. Or we can put it in through VBA. We'll choose VBA and then we'll just clear everything out. There's two options. You can put in a formula and then protect it. Or you can, of course, put it in through VBA. We'll put it in through VBA so I can show you how to do that. So range Q and the target row dot value, we could probably dot equals, what does it equal? And then we're going to put the quotation equals because we're putting in a formula, O and the target row and parentheses, times P and the target row. And the target dot row. Okay, that's it. That's going to be the total price. Okay, so now that we have that, let's just take a look at that, see if there's any issues, clear that up a little bit, save our code, make a change on that, see how I can animate, double check that. Now what we're going to do is double click that. Quantity, price, total. Let's change the quantity. Perfect. That's just what I want. Okay, great. Now all we need to do is save the invoice. So now we got to save it. So what I want to do is I want to take this information, the date, the customer, and the invoice total, and I want to save it inside here. I want to save it and the invoice number, give it a unique invoice, customer, date, and total. I want to put that right here. Then the individual items, these 3 individual items, I want to save them individually into this table called invoice items. So I want to take that unique invoice number, put in all the details right here. So that's just what I want to do. So let's go ahead and do some code so we can do that. The first thing what I want to do is I want to get the next invoice ID. Now if we remember in formulas, name manager, invoice number, tab over, we see we've got a offset unique numbers. Now we can use it, this, as long as they're numerical numbers, I want to get the next one. We're going to use the max formula and we're going to use +1. And that's just what we do right inside here. If there's an error, of course, it's going to return to 1. Why would there be an error? Maybe if there is no data, there would be an error. So we're going to get the max of the invoice numbers +1. That's going to get us the next invoice number. I've done the same thing, exact thing for purchase orders. No different. So we know that our next invoice number is going to be 7. So we can take that 7. I'm going to put it right here in the invoices, right here under A. Then we just have to put in the rest of the information. That's all we have to do to save the main, and then the rest part we just have to put that 7 here, bring all the items over. So let's write a macro to do just that. And then the last thing inside the macro is we just have to clear those fields. So we're going to write the macro right now. Let's go into our ERP macros and right in here on invoice save, and let's write this one right now. Okay, so in this we're going to dimension a few variables here. So we need to know the invoice row, so to dimension the invoice row as long, and also the last item row as long, as well as the invoice item row as long, and also the total. I need to know how many items, total items as long. Also the invoice number, we'll do that as a string. Dimension the invoice number as string. That's fine for this instance. And all right, we're ready to go. So we're going to focus on with sheet 1. Obviously sheet 1 is where we're going to take the major focus. I want to make sure that the user enters at least a customer name and date. So we need to make sure that N3 and P3 are not blank. So let's do that now. If .range N3.value equals empty, or .range P3.value equals empty, then message box, please make sure to enter a customer name and date. Okay, just let them know that those are required. Exit sub. Can't do that without actually doing. Okay, so all right, now we're ready to save. Assuming that they have that, we can move on. So for the invoice row, we need to know the first available invoice row. Invoices are of course located on sheet 3. So invoice row equals, it's going to be on sheet 3. It's going to be the first available row, sheet 3, and then the first available is going to be +1. So that's going to be the invoice row. Okay, that's the first one. And also I need to know the invoice number. If we remember correctly, invoice number is going to be located in B6. We've got that there, so we could get the invoice number. Invoice number is going to be located B6. That's our invoice number. Invoice number. Okay, so once we've got that, the invoice number, we're ready to go. So we're going to focus on sheet 3. That's going to take our data, sheet 3.range A, it's going to be our invoice number, and the invoice row dot value equals invoice number. So we know what that is already. And then also we have B, C, and D. So let's just copy this here and then put that down here, and then we'll just make the updates accordingly. So gonna have one for, let's see, B, C, and then D. So we'll just update the column letters here, B, C, and D, and then we'll go ahead and put in the right values. D. So B is, of course, that is going to be our invoice, our customer. So B is going to be our invoice customer. So equals, where's our customer located? That's located in N3. Dot range N3, that's our customer name. Customer. And then the next up we have is our date. So we got the date located in P3. So that's going to be equal. We can just copy and paste this and change that to P3. And then that's going to be P3. And that's going to be our date. And then lastly, of course, we have our total. And that's going to be located, our total is located right here in Q6. So we can put that in here. Paste that in and then put in Q6. And that's going to be our total. So we have all the information for at least the main. Now we need our items. So we've covered that A, B, C, and D of our invoice row. It's going to be our customer, our date, and our total. We have our invoice number in A. All right, so now we need to put in our items. So now let's put a little note here, add invoice items. And that's going to be in a separate database, right? That's going to be located right here, invoice items. We need to know, of course, the invoice number, the item name, description, quantity amount, and the total. I want to put all of that inside here. So first thing we need to do is determine how many items do we have. How many? If we need to know, I need to know. In this case, we have 3 items. So we need to get the last row here. That's going to tell us how many items we have because we know our first row is 8. So in this case, let's go ahead and put that in. So we have our last item row. We've already defined that equals, and that's going to be M. We're going to use column M. Right? If we take a look at that, we're located in column M. That's the column we're focused on. I want to know the last row in there. And once we have that last item row, I also want to know the first available row inside our invoice items. Our first available row here, what is that row? In this case, it's 18, but what is it? Let's put that down. I want to put that down as invoice item row is going to be equal to, what sheet is that? Of course, that's in sheet 8. Sheet 8 dot range. We're going to be looking at A and then 999. We'll do that manually. Dot end XL up dot row plus 1. First available invoice item row. Okay, so now I need to know the total items. Total item equals, what's it going to equal? Well, basically what I want to know is the last row. In this case, last row is 10. So how many items are there? If I subtract 7, I know that I've got 3 items. So 10 minus 7. So it's going to be the last row minus 7. That's going to get us our total items. So it's going to be equal to the last item row minus 7. That's going to get us our total items. Okay, so what we want to do is I want to add in the invoice number. So let's put that in, the invoice number. Basically what I want to do is I want to put it in right here, all the way here. So how do we do that? Well, we know the invoice item row. That's going to be sheet 4. So sheet 4 dot range, B, we're starting A actually, and the invoice item row, and then quotation marks colon all the way through A again. And in this case, I wanted to show the invoice item row plus total items minus 1 dot value. That's going to be the invoice equals the invoice number. That's going to be the invoice number. Invoice number. Okay, now what we can do is we can just copy that and make the updates accordingly for the remainder. So I'm going to copy that. And in this case, of course, we're going to focus on all the way through B, all the way through F. B through F. What's B through F? B through F is going to take on the item description, the quantity, the amount, and the total. Right? It's going to take on all that. Okay, so how do we do that? Let's go back in the code and do that. So B through F is going to equal here, basically N through Q. So that's all we need to do is bring that straight in. So equals dot range, B through F is going to basically equal whatever's in through. B through F is going to be equal to whatever's in M through Q. So we can write that up right now. Equals M, starting in row 8, that's our first row, 8 through Q. Q's our last row here. Q and, of course, the last row. Last item row. And last item row. Okay, so that's it. That's going to bring in all the details. Copy item details. That's going to bring everything in there. So we're good to go. Let's just double check that. Now what I want to do is just want to clear out. Once we've brought everything in, we can clear out the fields. Clearing out N, P, and then of course all the fields here. So let's do that right now. Dot range, what are the fields? N3, P3, M3, and then again all the way through M8 through Q, and then we'll just go to a large number, let's say 99. So that's going to clear everything out. So N2, and it's actually N3, 3 through P, M, N, so N3, so we'll clear all the N3, P3, and then everything else out. Clearing all those fields. Good, so we've got that, and then we'll just put in a little message box saying message box invoice saved. Okay, very good. That's going to be it for the invoice. Our purchase order is going to be very, very similar to that. Let's go ahead and save this application, and then we'll assign the macro. So all we need to do, again, another way to do it, just copy this, and then what we're going to do is going to click on here, hold down the control, right click, click N or the shortcut, and then paste it in, invoice save. That's the one we want. Okay, so we'll save it again, just to double check. And then I'm going to click Save Invoice. Let's just check this one, invoice save, .clear contents, obviously, .clear contents. Okay, so run this one, and we're good to go, invoice saved. Okay, let's just take a look at the data, make sure it went in there. Invoices, 7 the customer, the date, and the amount, that looks good. Our invoice items, we have 3 items. Everything looks good, just the way I want it. Okay, can see our items here. All right, excellent, that's exactly what I want. Now what we're doing, we've saved the invoices, now we're ready to go to purchase orders. So clicking on here, inventory and purchase order, it's gonna be very much the same, except we have vendors and dates. So let's go ahead and add some data validation here. Data validation, this one's going to be vendors. So we're going to call this vendors equals vendors. And that's going to be just a list of our vendors. We saw that named range. Also, again, short date, let's go ahead and put that in a short date. And we're going to do the same thing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the code and make the necessary updates. So all I'm going to do is take this code here, the one we just did for invoice save, I'm going to copy that down into purchase save, and then I'm going to make the necessary updates. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to look for find. I'm going to use Control F, and that's going to run this little find here. I'm going to look for any word that says invoice within that selected text. Actually, let's select the text first. So I want to make sure, just select here. And now what we do is run the find here, bring it up here, looking for anything that says invoice and replacing it with purchase, the word purchase. So bring it back up here. It keeps moving down. Purchase. I think there's only 1 or 2. Replace all. Okay, 5. Okay, that's good. And then also what I want to do is anything that says INV, I want to replace it to PURCH. Okay, so let's go ahead and find that again, looking for anything that says invoice and replacing it with something that says purchase. And I'll just do this short name purchase, fine. Okay, and then replace all with the selected text. That's 16. And now what I want to do is anything that says sheet 3, that's our, we don't want sheet 3, that's where our items are going to be saved. For invoices, we want, in this case, our purchase items are going to be sheet 6. So I'm going to look for anything that says sheet 3, I'm going to replace it with sheet 6. So I'm going to find that, sheet 3, and actually I need to select the text here, but that would be fine. Find it here, sheet 3, and replace it with sheet 6, and then we'll look through the code, and then we want to put it in sheet 6. All right, great. And then also what we want, you know, the invoices are on sheet 3, the purchase invoices actually are on sheet 3, purchases are on sheet 5. This should be sheet 5, not 6. Okay, 5, right? Because our purchases, invoices are on sheet 3, our purchases are on sheet 5. So replace all of that with the selected text. And then that's going to go. And then one more, what I want to do, notice that our invoice items are on sheet 4. So whatever's in sheet 4, I'm going to change that to our purchased items, which is sheet 6. Okay, so in this case, sheet 4, let's go ahead and select that text again here, find it. What we're looking for in this case is sheet 4, and replacing that with anything that's replacing that with sheet 6. So that's going to update the code because everything else is very, very similar to this. So that's it. Replace all in there, 3 replacements. Okay, good. We're at that. Now let's just look over the code. Purchase, save, purchase, last item, purchase item row, total items. That's good. Purchase number, N3. We need to update this. That's not exactly. So this is going to be U3 and W3. So let's go ahead and change that to U3 and then W3 for the date. So that's going to work. And of course, customer becomes vendor here. Vendor. Okay, so now we have that. Again, this is vendor, right? Vendor. And of course, this is our U3. Vendor's on U3. Date is on W3. Total is located on our, in this case, X6, and we'll put in that formula. So this is going to be X6, and data's on Q3. Let's just W3, not Q3, W. Okay, so we've got that. That looks good. So X, that's not Z, X. Okay, 6. So the total. So let's put in that total here under X6 equals the sum, in this case, of everything based on here. So we're just going to scroll down here to some regard, and then we'll just update that. So that's going to be our purchase total. So we have that now located in X6. Let's update. All right, our code looks good. Our vendor, our total purchase number is located, and our purchase number is not located in B6, it's located in B7. So we're going to make that update as well. B7. Okay, so now let's continue. Please make sure to enter a vendor name. That's good. U3, W3. Purchase number located in B7, A, sheet 5. That's where our purchases are going to be in sheet 5. That's good. All purchased items. Our last item row is not going to be M. Of course, it's going to be, in this case, T. That's where our purchase is going to go. So we'll update that to T. Purchased item row, that's fine. Sheet 6, our purchase items, correct. Total items, last term, this is going to be the same. We have the same number of total. Sheet 6 and the purchase item A is going to be equal, but this time our purchase items, same thing. Our purchase number will go in then in the sheet 6. That's fine. And also, I want to put in sheet 6 B and F. It's going to be all of our purchase item. All of those. Let's just take a quick look at that. Our purchase item is going to be the same thing. We've got description, quantity, amount, total. Very good. But we do need to add in the automation for that. So that means when we enter an item, it automatically. I'll show you about that in a second. We'll just double check this and we'll update that. So this is not going to come from M through Q anymore. It's going to come from, now it's going to come from T through X. So let's make those updates. Coming from T through X. Okay, see how quickly we can update those when we have similar macros here. That makes it a lot easier. All right, bring this down. Let's take a look at that. That's going to copy all the item details. Now let's clear out our contents. Of course, this is going to be U3, W3, and we also need to update the total formula here in the other one. So M8, of course, is going to be T through X. We're going to clear T through X in this case. We want to clear the contents all the way from T through X. So now that we have that cleared out, good. So now with the purchase saved, everything looks good. Okay, let's save that, but we do need to make the update because when we enter an item here, we need to put in that item information and then have the default. So I'm going to select here, go into home, again, actually data validation, and then we're going to put in lists, and then we're going to put in equals items. Now we have items. Okay, but again, we want to automate this, right? We want to automate the description, the quantity, amount, and the total. I need to know that that's going to be the on-sheet change, right? On-sheet change when we make that. So let's do that right now. Back into the on-sheet change ERP. We've already made this case for M8 through 51, but we need to add additional. This one's going to be a little bit different because this one's going to be focused on, again, T8 through T. So if not, target T8 through T, let's say 51, is nothing, then what do we want to do? I want to make some changes. Again, we're going to set the set found item. It's going to be equal to sheet 8. Again, items just as we did before, so we can rewrite. Actually, we can just copy this. We don't need to do that again. Just copy this just as we did before. I'm going to set the found item again. And then also what I want to do is if the found item is nothing, same thing, same, copy that. So we can just, if the found item is nothing, copy that, found item is nothing, and if. Okay, so now that we have that, assuming so, what do I want to do? This time I want to put in U through W, right? U all the way through W. I want to put in the description, the quantity, and the amount. And I want that to come over directly from our inventory items. B through D, the purchase quantity and the item cost. B through D, I want to bring it over into U through W. So we can do that. Range U and the target dot row and quotation colon W and the target dot row dot value equals sheet 8 dot range B, and in this case the found item dot row on, and of course D, and all the way the found item dot row dot value. Okay, so again, sheet 8, B in the found item dot row through D in the found item dot row. That's going to bring in all the information over. That's the description, item details. Okay, but now also I need the formula, right? We brought in the formula, but I need the total. So that's going to go into X. So what's going to be in there? Range X and the target dot row dot value equals, and then we're going to put in the equals, and then V and the target dot row, and then it's of course going to be multiplied times whatever's in W times whatever's in W and the target dot row. Okay, perfect. That's what I want. That's the total formula. Let's check it out, see if there's any issues. Okay, going back in here, and let's just go ahead and double click on this. Perfect. Let's change that. That looks just right. 25. Okay, so now we've got just the way we want it. All right, so now we're almost ready to save it. Let's double check. So now we've got information in here. Let's put in different items here, and adult t-shirt. Okay, so now we've got additional purchases. It's working just fine. What I want to do is I want to save this. So I'm going to hold down the control. I'm going to right click here, assign the macro, and we're looking for purchase save. So we're going to go down here to transaction, purchase, save here. Okay, that's what I want. Save the work that we've done. I'm going to double check this macro. This is the one we're going to be running right now under the ERP macros. That's the one we just created called purchase save. This is the one we're running. So let's take a look if there's any issues. Save purchase, purchase save. That looks good. Go into the purchases. Now we have 4, right? Our information our vendor got here. Our purchase items. All 3 items are in there. Excellent. Now we have our purchase. Great. So we've got 3 out of the 4 working right. We've got income and expenses working. We've got invoice and sales working. We've got inventory and purchases. Now let's focus on reports and graphs. So what I want to do is when I select any one of these 3s, I want that report to display here. Sales by customers, inventory. So how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing, when a user makes a selection change, I want to run something. So the first thing we want to do is write some code that says selection change here. And I also want to write another one macro that clears everything out and clears it. So clears everything out here. So let's write that now. So it's going to be focused on selection change. Now we already know when we make a selection change and we change this row, it's automatically going to display what report. So that's what I want to focus on here. Let's center that up so it looks a little bit better. So let's write a macro under selection change. So we're going to go back into the sheet and we're going to focus on this time selection change here. So scrolling down, selection change. What do we want to write under selection change? On this one, what we want to do is, first of all, if target.count large is greater than 1, then exit the sub. That's going to help prevent errors. Greater than 1, then exit sub. Okay, so now that we have that, let's shrink this up. We don't need this extra space anymore. Now that we have that, we're going to focus on just specific range. What range are we focused on? We're focused on AA4 through AA6. So that's what I want to write. So if not, direction AA4 through AA6 is nothing, then what do we want to do? Then I want to write some code. So first thing I want to do is whatever the row is, I want to put that in B5. So range B5 dot value equals the target dot row. Then what I want to do is I want to write a single macro to refresh the reports, a single macro. So that's going to be in here. So I've got that, just the name called reports refresh. So all I want to do is run that macro. We're going to write that right now. So inside this, I'm just going to paste that refresh reports. Okay, good. So we've got that. So let's write it. What do I mean by refresh reports? Now I got this module, which is refresh reports, report 1, report 2, and report 3. Now I've specifically given them these names because that's going to help us. Because all I need to do is refresh reports and it's going to automatically know what report based on the selected row that we have very, very easily. So let's go into that reports and see just what we want to do with that refresh. So the first thing I want to do is focus on sheet 1. With sheet 1, okay, and then I'm going to make sure that we clear the contents. I want to clear anything else here. So all the way from, let's say in case there's any data AB through A, let's just say AM, all the way over here, just to make sure that everything's clear. Any data that might be in here, we want to clear it out. So dot range AB, let's say 4 through AM, and then let's say 99999, large number, dot clear contents, dot clear contents. Okay, it's going to clear anything out. Also, I'm going to create some graphs. I want to create a graph called total sales. And it's going to be a nice sales graph, but I want to give it a name. So I'm just going to write the name of that, even though we haven't created it yet, but it'll help us when we do create it. Total sales. And then I want to make it visible. I want to hide it, right? I only want to show it for the specific report. Total sales not visible. Now let's create an error, at least until I create it. So we'll create that error. Equals MSO false. I just want to write that code because I know I want to create a sales chart called total sales. And then I want to run a specific macro. I want to run the macro, right? Whatever macro has been selected, I want to run. How do we know what macros to run? We have report 1, 2, and 3. Well, we know we've selected 4. If I select 4, that's going to be report 1. If 5, it's 2. And if it's 6, it's 3, right? So all I need to do is subtract 3 from this number, and I'll know what report to run, what macro to run. So I can do this. Run report, and what? It's going to be whatever's in B5 minus 3. Dot range B5 minus 3. So if I want to run report 1 and inside B5 is 4, B5 minus 4 is 1. So that means report 1. So this way we can easily run regardless. And also I just want to select outside of this. I don't want to keep the selection inside. So let's just select something like AC2. Let's select the date. Just select out of it. So dot range AC2 dot select. Okay, great. So I'm not going to run this because it's going to prevent an error until I create this shape. What I want to do is I want to create a brand new report, let's say called sales by customer. That's going to be our first report. That's the one I want to run. If I run it, it's going to be an error. Why? Because we don't have a total sales, but we will have it, so that's fine. So as soon as what I want to do is select sales by customer, I want to run a report, and I want to have that information appear here. Sales by customer. Now we know it is in our invoices, we have invoices and customers. So what I really want to do is set up a criteria, and I want to know all the customers that had sales within those dates. Within what dates? Within the dates on our report. Within this date here, January 1st to January 30th, I want to know all the customers. So the best way to do that is use an advanced filter. We have all of them. And if I can set up an advanced filter, I've got a date here. So if I take that date into criteria and I set criteria based on the start date, if you remember correctly, this is where the start date is going to come in. Start date, end date. So if I create criteria within that start date, greater than the start date, less than the end date, and then I create a unique list based on that, then what I want to do is I want to create a formula based on the total sales of those two dates. So I want to look at all of these amounts, and I want to know if the date is within that period, sum it. So how do we do that? If, first of all, I want to look here, I want our advanced filter to create all the customers that had sales within those dates. So we're going to create an advanced filter to list the customers here. Then I want to create a formula. So I've got the formula here. If J3 equals empty, meaning here, then just put NA. That's going to help us for our graph if we have a graph. Otherwise, sum. I want to sum ifs based on certain conditions. First of all, what do I want to sum? I want to sum D, the column D, that's our totals. And what is our first criteria going to be? B. B is our customer name. If our criteria is going to equal to J3, J is our customer. So that's our first criteria. What's our second criteria? Our second criteria is the date. It has to be greater, that means C, column C, our date, needs to be greater than or equal to our start date. And also our third criteria has to be less than or equal to our end date. That's going to give us all the sales based on those dates. They don't have to be formatted here, that's fine. So all of our advanced filter needs to do is determine what customers had sales within these two dates. So let's just write that. We'll create an advanced filter to do just that. And then what I want to do is I want to bring this information over and copy it, bring it right into our report section and place it right inside here. Then I want to create a graph based on that data. So let's try that right now. In fact, let me just comment this out right here because it'll create an error every time I try to run it until at least we create that. So, okay, so now that we have it, so let's start writing some code so that we can bring that information in. So the first thing we want to do on the sales report is dimension the last invoice row as long because we need to run an advanced filter. Also the last result row as long. That's about all we're going to need. We're going to focus on sheet 3. That's our invoices. So with sheet 3. And what do we want to do? I want the last invoice row is going to be equal to, it's going to be equal to basically and our last row, which is fine. And also what I want to do, if for some reason, if the last invoice row is less than 3, then then I guess we can exit the sub. No data, we can exit sub. Okay, assuming that there is data, we can move on. The first thing I want to do is I want to clear any previous customers. In case this was run before, from J3 all the way down, I want to clear that out. So let's do that right now. Dot range J2 through J999, and then we'll just clear that out. Dot clear contents. It's going to clear any previous results. So once we have those previous results cleared, we can then move on to our advanced filter. So what is our advanced filter going to be? I really just want to focus on 2 items here. I want to focus on B and C, our customer and our date, because all of our results are going to be, criteria is going to be based on that. Our criteria is going to be here, H through I, and our results are going to come right here. So this should be criteria and results. It's both criteria and results. Because our criteria is going to be focused on these 2 dates, our results are going to come in here. So let's continue to write that here. So dot range, bring this down so we can see both the data and the code as well. Bring it up here. B2, or that's our customer B2, all the way through C, which is our date, and our last invoice row, and not dot value, but dot advanced. We're going to run advanced filter. And that advanced filter, we're going to copy it. Excel, we want to copy that to a new location. What's our criteria? Criteria range equals dot range. What is our criteria? It's going to be H2 through I3. H2 through I3 is those 2 dates. We need to be inside those 2 dates, not value, of course. So once we have our criteria, we can put our results. Where do we want our results? Only in J, right? Our results are only going to go into column J, and our results are going to only be. So copy to range equals dot range J2. That's where our results are going to go. And we want unique. I want the unique customers. Unique colon equals true. Okay, so only those unique customers that I have. I don't want to duplicate customers in that. Once we have all of that, we can set our last results row. Now I need to know the last results row. Last result row is going to equal in J. So this time we're going to focus on column J. That's where our results are going to go. Okay, those are customer results. Once we get those results, our formulas are already in there, so they'll take care of our. So let's just make this blank and not NA. I don't look like that. Let's say if it's blank. Okay, so now what we'll do is I'm just going to copy down this formula and make sure that these formulas go all the way down. Paste the formulas. Okay, so we got our formulas in there. All we need to do is as soon as we add our customers in there, our formula is going to populate accordingly. So we have our last results row. Now we can focus on sheet 1. So as soon as we get our customers, now I can just say sheet 1. We're going to start it out. Let's just put out some titles in there. And so all I really want to do is just take in customer and total sales starting in J2 and bringing it inside. So let's do that right now. So sheet 1 dot range. Let's take a look at that. Where do we want to place it? I want to place it right here, probably in AC4 through AD. So I want to place the information right here, starting in AC4. So let's do that. AC4 through AD, and the last result row plus 2. Why is it plus 2? Because our results are coming in 4, but they start in 2, right? We're starting in 2 because I want to bring in 2, but our results are coming into 4, so we need to increase it by 2. So that value is going to be equal to dot range J2 through K and the last results row and the last result row. Okay, very good, very good. And also, let's just take a quick look at that and see how we are on that. Let's run that and then we'll continue on with the macro. We've got a few lines to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the work, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click here and then just take a look at this. Copy to, there's no extra T in there, okay. Continue on, and then, okay, just let's make this J3. We can't clear out the contents. We can't clear out the header on this, right? Can't clear out that. We got to keep that header in there. J3, we just clear out the values. The header must stay in there. Continuing on, okay, that looks good. Okay, and then method of range class, we cannot, when we debug that, we can't select a range unless we're actually on the sheet. Okay, as soon as we're on the sheet, we can then select it, it'll work fine. Continuing on, now we can select something. You see, we can select it when we're on the sheet. Okay, so click sales by customer. All right, that looks what I want, but actually, we need to format that and make it look a little bit better. So what I want to do is I want to add some additional formatting in here. So if there's a value in our header row here, let's add some additional formatting. So go in conditional formatting, new rule, and then we're going to use a value that contains on their value. So we'll just go to cells that contain a value, and then let's just non-empty cells. Let's just go no blanks. And then we're going to format that. If it's not blank, I'm going to put in a fill effects, just add a little bit of a format to that so that we can see the difference between those headers. Again, just adding this, and then I'll put that down, and then I'll put a border around it, and I'll also make it bold using our default border color here all the way around, and then the font bold, so just in case there's values in here. Okay, that looks good. That's what I want, but now I want to add some information here just in case. Let's just also add in some additional formatting here, so that way if there's values here, they're going to show up. I'm going to go into home, conditional formatting, manage rules. I want to add a new rule on this one, and I'm going to use a formula. So for odd rows equals mod, two conditions, equals, and what are the conditions? One, the value is not blank, so the first value would be this one, but I want it not absolute, so F4, so it's just relative. AB5 does not equal empty, right? So basically, if the cell does not equal empty, and what is the other condition? I want a mod, right? So let's just write in that, not equals mod. So even rows, I want to give them a little bit of a color. What color is that? I just want to do a little bit light color so that we can differentiate the data. It's got a nice look on it. So format, we'll just call this white, right? And then what we'll do is I'm going to copy this exact rule. So giving that white, and then what I want to do is I'm going to add one more new rule, use a formula. So that one's for even rows if it's not even. This one's going to be for odd rows. So in this case, I'm going to format it this blue, but not exactly, a little bit lighter. And that's going to give us a nice effect that we can see it. So good. So let's take a look at that. Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want to look at. Let's go ahead and enter a pie chart here. Insert, and let's click on the pie chart. Let's try a 3D one here. That looks good. Total sales 3D, but I want to make that updates here. We can bring it down in case there's additional data here, like that, in case there's additional data, and we can lose the legend. We don't need a legend there. I just want to give it a total sales, but I do want some labels in here. So I'm going to format, add the data labels to that, and then we'll format the data labels. I'm going to add some additional series name. Yeah, that's good. I want to add not the series name, but let's say the category name. That looks better. So that would be the customer. And then what we'll do is we will make it white. So we'll go ahead, click on the number. We can just actually exit out here. We can click on home, make it white, the font, and then I'm just going to go ahead and make it bold here. Give it a nice look. Also, I want to remove that, the shape fill. I'm going to say no fill on the shape, and then no border, no outline on that, no outline. Okay, so that kind of looks good. That's kind of what I want to see. And of course, we got to give it that name. Remember that name that we assigned? That's called total sales. So let's go ahead and give it that name. We can now uncomment that out so it won't be created. So this is the name I want to get it. We'll click on the shapes here, the selection pane. This is chart 150. So let's call this total sales. That way we can hide it accordingly when that report's selected. Now we can save it. Let's go ahead and close that out. So it gives us a nice total sales look here. And then we'll click on it, and then it goes away, but now we need to show it. So, right, I want to show it. So let's copy this. And now what I want to do is put it in here. .visible, okay, equals MSO true. So now we're making it true. So now that we've set it up, now when we select it outside and inside, it shows up. That's what I want. Now we've got our first report showing. So when we selected, our customers show up. But what about when we select inventory stock report? Let's make that report. In this report, I want to know what stock we currently have. So if we have here inventory items here, what I want to do is I want to know all the inventory stock that we have based on that. So what I want to do is I want to run a macro that is going to determine all of the items here. I want to copy them over. And then I want to know through formulas how many purchased, how many sold, and how many were in stock. So how do we know how many were purchased? Well, simply it's going to be the sum if the total purchased based on this name and based on the item quantity. So we're going to use sum if. We're going to determine the range of our purchase item name based on this filter, the shirt, and in this case, the item quantity. So we're summing all those that have been purchased. And the same thing for sold, but in this case, we're going to sum based on the invoice item name and the invoice item quantity. So here we use the purchase item quantity, and here we use the invoice item quantity. Now it's just as simple. All we need to do is, if there's value in here, all we need to do is subtract the total sold from the amount purchased, and that gets us our in-stock quantity. So all I need to do is run an advanced filter, put the data in here, and we already have our formulas in here. So it's very, very simple. So let's write some code to do just that. So that's going to be our report number 2. We're going to focus on with sheet 8. So with sheet 8 is what we're going to focus. And we also want to know the last row. So we're going to dimension the last item row as long. So we need to get that. So the first thing I want to do is clear everything out. So in case there's new items added, I want to clear H3 through H99. I want to clear that out. So dot range H3 through H99999, and then dot clear the content, dot clear content. So that's clears all the items. So once the items are cleared, we can then determine the last item row. Last item row is going to be equal to, of course, column A, that's our last item row, and XLF. So now all I really need to do is just simply copy the items over. So dot range H3, we don't, unless we have duplicate items, we don't need to run an advanced filter, through H and the last item row, and the last item row dot value equals dot range. I'll put in the equal sign there, don't forget that. What is that dot range? And then we want to put in A3. We're going to focus on that's the item description. I want the item name here, focused on column A, so that's the item name. So that's A3 through A and the last item row dot value. Item name. It's going to bring all of our item names over. Then I'm just going to run dot calculate in case that's important. Dot calculate, that confirms that we're going to calculate all those formulas that got in. Now all I need to do is take this information and just copy it over and bring it over into our reports starting here. So that's just what we're going to do now. Sheet 1 dot range AC4, we'll use AC4 through AF's the last column, and the last item row plus 2, right? We're starting 4 and we're coming from 3, so we need to add in 2. Dot value equals, right? We're starting at 2 because I want to copy over the headers, not just the data, but the headers as well. So if we look into the inventory items, I want to include 2 as well. That's why we're adding 2, because we're starting in 2 and we're bringing it over into 4. So we need to add 2 on that one. So that's why all the way from H all the way through K. So that's what we're going to focus on here. So equals dot range H2 through K and the last item row, and the last item row dot value, bringing over all the data. Okay, let's just take a look at that and see how that looks. So we can run that. Let's go into that, and I'm going to select that here, and that is very nice. That looks pretty good. We have the number of stock, number sold there. Very good. Let's go ahead and click customer. I do want to format this by dollars, so we should focus on that and then update this. I want to make sure all this is formatted general. So let's just do that because we want to change the number formats according to based the data on there. Okay, so let's put that in. It's looking really nicely here. So the first thing we want to do in this is format the data. So let's copy this range here and format it as a number or just general. It's fine for me. Dot value, we'll just call this dot number format equals, and just called general. And then also what I want to do is I want to format this one here, AD through 5 through 87. I want to format that as probably dollars. So let's do that, and you can format your own. So let's go back up here, and what is it that I want to focus on in this case? AD5. So let's do that. Sheet 1 dot range AD5 through AD and the last result row plus 2 dot number format equals, and we'll just go try the $0, and then okay, that'll give us a nice little format. Let's just take a look at that here. So now we run that. That's what I want. Now it's all general, but we need to update that. Sheet 1. Okay, perfect. There we go. That's what I want. Now we got the right sheet. So sheet 1, focus on AC, the last item row. This should be +2, number format, exactly as it is there. Data validate. Okay, great. So we got one more report to write. That's looking good. We should probably make this a little bit bigger so all the information can show up on there. There we go. That's the way I like it, nice and big. Okay, one more row, income and expense. That's what I want to write next. That's going to be the last one before we finish up this marathon training. Let's do that right now. Okay, so inside the macro, here we go. Report number 3, we're going to focus on income and expense. That's going to come from our transactions here, our data transactions. So what do I want to do? I want to determine the income and expense based on this from date and based on this to date. When I run this, I want to know all of that. So how are we going to do that? Well, the best way to do that is through some criteria. I want to know, first I want to know all the income, then I want to know all the expenses. So we're going to run 2 different criteria, one for income, one for expenses. And I want 2 different results. One for income, one for expenses. And I want those results to appear here. We're going to use an advanced filter to do just that. So let's go into the code and write that right now as our last and final one. First thing I want to do, this is going to be the income and expense report. So the first thing I want to do is dimension some variables here. Dimension last transaction row as long, because that's going to be a long variable. We need to know that. And the last income row as long, and also the last expense row, because they're going to be 2 different ranges. Last expense row as long, and also the report row. I need to keep track of what row we're on the report. So the report row as long. Okay, so now we're going to focus on sheet 9. So with sheet 9, that is our transactions. That's the one we're going to be focused on. I'm going to be writing a good amount of information in there. So what do we want to do? I want to determine the last row. So last transaction row, it's going to be equal to, of course, and that's going to give us our last row for the transactions. And then what I want to do is I want to run an advanced filter. Let's just focus on our income. Now, if you remember, we already have our income, our criteria here, income and expense. So all I want to do is filter our data based on our income. I want to know just the accounts, just the transactions, only for income. And I want those, the account, and I want the amount right here. So the results are going to go here, criteria is right here. So that's what we're going to focus on. So let's do that. Our income result is going to be dot range C3, our header rows, through D. All we're focusing on here is just the account and the type. And the last transaction row, not a value, but dot advanced filter. And what's our criteria? We're going to copy to another range. Criteria range is equal to, of course, is going to be just J2 through J3. So dot range J2 through J3. That's it. That's all we're going to focus on just for the income, J3, not value. And then our copy to range. And what's that going to equal? We're going to copy to the range equals M2. That's where I want to put those accounts. Equals dot range M2, not value. And we want unique. Unique equals true. So we want to make sure that that's unique equals true. Okay, so now that we have the income results, I want to get the last income row. So the last income row is equal to, in this case, we're going to focus on column M. That's going to get us our last income row. Once we have that, we can then move on to expenses. So our expense results. Okay, so pretty much I can just copy this and then make the updates accordingly to the news. So let's continue on. So what is that going to be? So it's going to be the same original data, but in this case, it's not going to be J2, it's going to be K. So we're going to focus on K2 through K3, copy to range, M2, not M2, but in this case P, it's going to go over to P. Everything else is the same except this is going to be the last expense row. Okay, last expense row. Okay, so now that we have all that, we can do end with. Oh, we end with. Okay, so now we're going to focus on sheet 1. So let's do that with sheet 1. We're pretty much done with all the information on our expense. Now we can focus on bringing the data over into sheet 1. So the first thing what I want to do is in sheet 1, of course, right here, I want to put in AC4, I want to put account, then I want to put amount, and then I want to start with the income in AC5. So let's just go ahead and put that right now. So dot range AC4 is going to be equal to, in this case, account. Capitalize that. Okay. And then next up, pretty much the same thing, but in AD4, I want to write amount. I want to put in those headers there for our information. So next up, AD4, this one's going to be amount. So let's go ahead and put that in, amount. Now that we have account and amount, I want to focus on this time AC5. And AC5, we're going to put in income because we're going to start out with income. So let's go ahead, write that in now, income. So now we have our information. Now we have our headers. Let's go ahead and put in our data. So what's our data going to be? It's going to start out in AC6, right? Dot range, AC6, and of course our count and our amount through AD and what? Our last income row and our last income row plus 3. Why 3? Because here we're starting in 6, here we're starting in 3. So we got to add 3. Dot value equals sheet 9 dot range. I'm going to focus on M3 through N and the last income row dot value. So that's going to bring over all of the data from there. Now, once we have that, what we can do is we're ready for the expenses. So, but before that, we want to add in a total income. The report row is going to be equal to the last income row plus 4, because I want to keep track of what row we're on inside the report row. Once I know that, I want to put in the total income dot range, AC, and the report row dot value is equal to what? What's it going to be equal to? This case is going to be called total income. So we want to keep track of that. It's going to go in AC. And then in AD in the report row, we're going to actually put the formula for that. So let's copy that, put that down and update that to AD. This is where our formula is going to go to, equals, and then equals the sum. What is the sum going to be? In this case, it's going to be AD6, because that's our starting amount, through AD and what? And the report row minus 1 and what else? And we've got to end the parentheses on that on our formula here. Okay, good. So now we've got that. Now we've got our formula for our income. Now we're ready to add in our expenses. Where's our expenses going to go? It's going to go inside our next row. So let's put that in. AC, it's going to be AC in the report row plus 1. So we can just write that in here, copy that down here, and then put it down here. So it's going to be AC in the report row plus 1, and then we'll just change it to expenses. Okay, expenses. I want our expenses to go inside there. Okay, so once we have our expenses, I'm ready to bring in all of our expense data. So how do we do that? Okay, so in this case, dot range, AC and the report row plus 2, right? And the report row plus 2, but what else? And all the way through AD and the report row plus the last expense row minus 1. That's going to get us our information. So what do we want to bring that from? And we're going to bring that from, of course, our sheet 9 equals sheet 9 dot range, in this case P3 through Q and the last expense row through Q and the last expense row dot value. That's going to bring in our expense data. Okay, once we have that, now I want to put in the total expenses. So let's find that. So dot range, AC, that's where our title is going to go into, AC. What row is it going to go into? And the report row again, plus the last expense row. Dot value is equal to the total expenses. Total expenses. Okay, very good. So now that we've got the total expenses, I want to put in the next column over, I want to put the actual total expenses. So I want to put the sum of that. So just copy that over and then change that to AD. AD in this case, now I'm going to put the sum formula inside there, the sum of the total expenses equals here in this side the parentheses, the sum parentheses of A, in this case AD and report row plus 2 and all the way through, and what's it through? Parentheses colon AD all the way through, and the report row plus the last expense row minus 1, and then of course end the parentheses, and parentheses. Okay, that looks good. All right, so that's it. So that's going to have our total expense. So the last thing we want to do is just the profit. So it's going to basically be one row down. I want to go one row down here and put in the profit. So in this case, it's going to be AC, in the last expense row, of course, plus 1 is where I want to put the total profit. Total profit. This one's going to be equal to, caps lock, total profit. Okay, so now we got the, and of course in D, this same one, but of course in column D, we're going to actually put that total profit in. So we're going to copy that, put it in here. This one's going to go in D. So what is that total profit formula? All we really need to do is just take that amount. We don't even need to put it in a formula. Equals dot range. What is it? Dot range AD and the report row and the report row, which is going to be our income dot value. Remember, this is our income amount. This is our income amount. Why is that? How do we know that? Because if we look here, the formula for our income came in right here. AD in the report row. This is our formula for income. So we know that this value is income. So all I need to do is take that value and subtract the expenses. And where's our expenses? Our expenses are right here. We just added our expenses right here. So all we need to do is subtract this. Copy this here, minus, put it in right here. So this is the income minus the expenses. That's going to get us our last expense row. And that is it. Let's just take a look at that, fix any issues with that, and then make some updates on some conditional formatting. I'm going to save it here, and let's just take a look at that. Fix the issue here on this one. Fix that. I don't know how that happened. Okay, so let's continue on. Okay, that looks pretty good. Just going to add some conditional formatting. We have one additional here. We need looks like, all right, let's just reduce one row here. We need to reduce one row on the total expenses and the total profit. So let's subtract 1 here. We want total expenses, and the same thing here. And then do this, and then we can just get rid of this plus 1. That should be fine. I think that's going to look right. Let's just take a look at that. Refresh that report here, and then we're going to add some conditional formatting. That's what I want. That looks good. Let's go ahead and add some conditional formatting inside here. So let's go ahead and conditional formatting, new rule, and I'm going to use a formula, and I'm going to base it on this here. But what I don't want is, I don't want this column based on here. And what I want to do is I want to say or. I want to create an or event because I want to know all the totals. I want to do some formatting to the totals. AC, and then 5, this could be for any row, okay, equals, let's call this total income, if it's total income, or what? Or total expense. So in that case, or AC5 total expense, or what? Total profit. So let's write in that. Now we just need to update profit. So if it's any of those conditions, I want to do something. I want to put it bold. I want to make it look a little better, and then we'll make this expenses. So from those conditions, expense. Okay, so I want to format those. I want to make it, put a border around it, top and a bottom. I want to put it, the font, I want to make it bold, and click OK, and then OK, and then let's take a look at it. That's good, but I want to extend it over to both of them in this case, not just that. So let's add in that. I want to do conditional formatting manager rule, keep that here under the column here. So basically this column, and this column, and then okay, apply that. And then I want to bring it over, not over the AI, just going to bring it over to, just for AD is sufficient enough. So that's okay, AD, and apply that. There we go. That's what I want it to look. That's the nice look. Okay, that's what. And then one more thing, I want to format AD again as a, just like we did in the sales customer, just as an amount. So let's copy that. Let's go ahead and copy that just as we did it up here, because we did it right here under here. So AD, and then of course we can paste it down here. We already know at the last row. So AD5 through AD in the last. In this case, we're going to focus on this one here. These are that's our last row number right there. So AD report plus last. And okay, good. Now we formatted that. Now it's formatted. That's the way I like it. So now we got total expenses. This one I need to add there. Total income, total expenses. On one more update to the conditional formatting on here. Okay, let's take a look at that. Expenses. I think I have expense, EXPEN. Fix that. Expenses. Okay, perfect. Now we've got it all saved. Let's go ahead and apply that. There we go. Now we've covered it all. Okay, awesome. Wow, this has been an incredible training. A few more things. I just want to update one more thing. I want to assign a macro to this button here. So click on that, assign the macro, and that's going to be, of course, reports refresh. You could have figured that out. We've got that down here, reports refresh. I also, when I change the date, I want it to refresh the reports automatically. AC2 or AE2, I want to run that macro. So let's do that inside there, ERP. If we make a change, if I make a change to those, if not, intersection AC2 through A or AE2, AC2 or AE2, what do we want to do? I want to refresh that reports. Nothing, then that should be 2, not 3. 2, then reports refresh. Okay, let's take a look at that. And then if we make a change, 115. All right, that refreshes the report. Very good. That's what I want to see. Let's just do 1, 2. It should be a little bit of data. No data within here. That's what I like. 130. Okay, so now the report, let's put in the right date, 130. Okay, so now the report's refreshed. The inventory stock report's going. We have our item. This has been an incredible training. Let's just take a look at that back. We have our income and expenses. Now our transactions. We have our invoicing and sales. We have our inventory purchasing. We have create purchase orders and an incredible report with 3 reports. Awesome. It's been an incredible training. Let's just take a look at everything. It looks good. If there's any issues, I'll go ahead and update that. Feel free to download this. Of course, if you want 150 of my workbooks, I've got them available for just 37 cents per workbook for a total of $56, 150 of them. It's an amazing deal. That really helps us out. I really appreciate you sticking with us on these extra long trainings. Thanks so much. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.